What's up, everybody? Welcome into the latest Windy City Gridiron Radio. With you, as always, is your host, Robert Zaglinski. You can follow us on Twitter at WC Gridiron and follow me on Twitter at Robert Zaglinski. And today we're going to talk the Bears' offense against the Seahawks' defense in the upcoming Monday Night Football matchup, the Bears' 2018 home opener. To help me preview that matchup, I've brought in the Athletic Seattle's Ben Baldwin, who you can follow on Twitter at Ben Baldwin. That's at BenBBAldwin. That's at BenBBAldwin. Ben, what's up?
Hey, thanks for having me. Looking forward to talking about this game that feels like it's forever away, but I'm sure we'll be here before we know it.
Yeah, I was gonna say let's not get too anticipatory because I almost feel like it's gonna be very ugly, and we're just missing football right now. But then once the game's happening, considering how Mitch Trubisky looked and considering that Seahawks offensive line against Khalil Mack, I'm not sure this will be as pretty or we'll be as excited on Monday as we are now.
Yeah, it might be a disaster. Which is unfortunate because it's the one primetime game of the day, so everyone will be watching and probably making fun of both of these teams. So we'll look forward to that.
Let's jump to the defense, or the Seahawks defense. That is, I know it's not the Legion of Boom. In fact, it's a far cry from that. I see that the Broncos almost had 500 yards of offense, Ben, but there are still some good. I mean, there's still some good players. Earl Thomas is still there. Bobby Wagner, Frank Clark. Where do the Bears still have to, I guess, worry or concern themselves, especially given their paltry second half performance against the Packers?
Yeah, those. Sorry, those are. When you start naming good players on the Seahawks defense, you kind of run out of names pretty fast, and those are the three names. So.
Yeah, they used to be a longer. Yeah. I admit it. Like I stopped. Like okay, and then everybody else might be good or maybe good. Yeah.
Yeah. So over the offseason, they lost Cliff Averill, Michael Bennett, Richard Sherman, Sheldon Richardson, and I'm probably forgetting people. KJ Wright is out. I think he'll miss this game as well. He missed the first game, and his replacements really struggled replacing him. So if they just manage to not throw near where Earl Thomas is, then there's really not a whole lot to worry about. There was almost no pass rush, and the Broncos aren't exactly known for their offensive line. The player playing right cornerback, Trey Flowers, was drafted in the 5th round and converted from safety and then thrown onto the field in week 1 just because I think the plan was to go with Byron Maxwell, but he got hurt. So there's a lot of weaknesses everywhere. So it'll be interesting to see if Trubisky can bounce back from especially the second half of that game when he's facing Seattle's defense.
You know that the Broncos aren't really known for their offensive line play. I think that's also, in general, just extending that further, that gives a lot of credit, or maybe we shouldn't really credit Case Keenum, who had. I mean, he threw 3 picks, but then he also had 329 yards. I assume that wasn't necessarily against Thomas, or that was when they weren't throwing in Thomas's direction.
So there was one play where Earl Thomas probably made a mistake, and that was the long Emmanuel Sanders touchdown. But other than that, he was not the reason that Denver was scoring. They took Thomas off the field for 10 plays because he had just come back after skipping training camp in preseason, so they didn't want to have him play the whole game. And Denver scored 3 touchdowns in the game, and 2 of them came on the drives where Earl Thomas missed plays. So the hope from the Seahawks is if they think he's ready to be full go and he doesn't have to come off the field on defense, then it looks like a different defense when he doesn't have to sit plays out.
Was it always like this, even when the Legion of Boom was in its heyday, where Thomas had to be at full go, where he was basically the fabric holding everything together?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So this is he didn't really miss any snaps the first 6 seasons or so of his career from 2010 through 2015, and then in 2016 he got injured, and then when he went out, the defense took a huge dive. Last year he got injured, and when he was out, they took a huge dive. And now this is the third year in a row when Earl Thomas isn't on the field, that the Seahawks defense goes from a pretty good defense to one that's well below average. So he's just that important, which makes it all the more confusing why the team seems so reluctant to extend him.
For the Griffin brothers, we'll get back to Thomas in a bit. For the Griffin brothers, how have they looked so far? Obviously, Shaquille Griffin has a little more experience. Shaquem Griffin, great story too. Also, actually, good football player. How have they looked so far, and what are reasonable expectations for them? So you don't necessarily have to go off one game sample size. That's the preseason and camp too, because I know that's more of what we have to work on.
Shaquille looks great. He's the no one can really fill Richard Sherman's shoes, but he's trying and doing a good job. So he's the heir apparent to holding down that left cornerback slot from the defensive side. Shaquem really struggled in his first game, and it's his first NFL game, so we don't want to be too hard on him, but he was filling in for KJ Wright, who's been kind of one of the rocks of the Seahawks defense for the last many, many years. And he was notably out of place in a couple of places, took a couple of bad tackling angles, and there was a long kind of dump off to I think it's Philip Lindsay, the rookie Broncos running back, and that was Shaquem's responsibility, and he wasn't there, and it turned into like a 30 or 40 yard touchdown just from a dump off to a running back. So the Seahawks gave up several big plays, which is really not what they want to do, and Shaquem Griffin was partially or fully responsible for some of them.
What are reasonable expectations for him as a rookie, especially since he's starting right away? So how do you want to see him progress over the course of the year?
That's a fair question. The hope would be that he would at least be like assignment correct. And like it is such an unfair thing to ask, because KJ Wright and Bobby Wagner have been playing side by side since Wagner was drafted in 2012. So that's 5-6 years of experience together. So they know everything that they're going to be doing, and throwing a rookie into that situation is just it's such a hard thing to ask. But the Seahawks don't really have anyone else that they can have do it. So the hope is he'll learn and won't be such a vulnerability as he was on Sunday.
Another, I guess, experiment that I noted and I forgot. I completely, to be honest, I completely forgot that Seahawks signed him. Barkevious Mingo. What are, I guess, we can call him a bust, right? Based off of his expectations. Yeah, he's a bust. Okay, so what? I mean, he's starting. He started. He's featuring significantly in the box score, and he started. What are reasonable expectations for him, or is that just something that the Seahawks are trying to salvage because they were desperate?
Yeah, they're definitely desperate for a pass rush. So they have him and Deion Jordan, both formerly very highly drafted players who.
Oh my God, Deion Jordan! I didn't realize. Yeah. Oh man.
They've gone through so many players from the top of the 2013 draft. So last year they had Luke Jokel, who was drafted like 2nd overall or something. They brought in Deion Jordan. They brought in Marcus Smith, who was also, I think he was the 14th overall pick in that, maybe the 2014 draft. So they really like their former highly drafted players. So Mingo and Jordan are the two that are still playing semi-prominent roles on the team. For Mingo, it's I don't really have a good sense of how they'll use him. He's normally a strong side linebacker, which that position's kind of dying out in the NFL as more teams are putting 3 wide receivers on the field, and then defenses are putting 5 defensive backs on the field instead. So I'm wondering if they'll use him to rush the passer on 3rd downs or provide some sort of speed on the defense, but I don't really have a great sense of that one yet.
If you're the Bears, and outside of, just in general not throwing towards Thomas or throwing in Thomas's general vicinity, where where do you attack the Seattle defense? Where is the main weakness? Where do you focus on with your backs, your receivers, what have you?
So I think the two weak spots are whoever, if KJ Wright's not there, whoever's playing weak side linebacker. So that's probably Shaquem Griffin. Either that or the left side, whoever's playing wide receiver off to the left side where they can attack Trey Flowers, who really struggled. So those are the two players I would really take a look at. Have you seen the discussion going around about whether Mitch Trubisky can throw to his left?
Yeah, I don't necessarily buy that. I just think he doesn't see the field well. That's a different thing.
Okay, so if he can throw to his left, then this would definitely be the game to do it because the Trey Flowers will be over there, and that's really the spot to target in this game.
I think Trubisky can throw to his left. I don't think he can see to his left. I think that's more of the accurate evaluation. So
Got it.
I mean, ideally, he'd be able to take advantage of Flowers, but I'm not sure he'll make the progression towards there. Um, as far as the rushing game, so Denver had 146 yards rushing. Was that just basically straight up play? Was that just Lindsey and Royce Freeman and I guess Devontae Booker with 2 carries, running roughshod?
Yeah, pretty much. They both look good. Sometimes it's hard to tell whether the running backs are doing really well or if the defense is just playing poorly. And I haven't gone back to watch the Denver's rushing offense snaps that closely, so I don't have a great sense. But it's not like the Broncos are known for being a good rushing team. So
yeah, I feel like that's the whole theme here. The Broncos offense isn't really good, and I'm looking at this box score. Aside from Keenum's 3, it's kind of disconcerting if I was looking at this from a Seattle perspective, and just aside.
Oh yeah, and if Keenum hadn't thrown 3 interceptions, it could have been a really ugly game from Seattle's perspective. So one of his 3 interceptions, the Earl Thomas one, Thomas returned it to the Denver 15-yard line, and then Wilson threw a touchdown on the next play. So without those plays, then Seattle's offense probably looks worse and their defense probably looks worse. So having all that happen against the Broncos, who were a 5-11 team last year, is not a great sign for how the season's going to go.
I would imagine. I don't know if I'd necessarily classify Frank Clark as someone that's that's a game. He's not like a game breaker in the classic sense where you absolutely have to double him and make sure he's always taking care of like Khalil Mack or Von Miller, but he's still a guy that's consistently gotten double-digit sacks and pressures through his career so far. If you're the Bears, how do you slow him? Is it just as simple as he's the real only consistent pass rushing threat?
Yeah, he and Deion Jordan were the only players that got at least 2 pressures on Sunday, which is kind of sad. Clark had 3 and Deion Jordan had 2, and Keenum was not under pressure very often. So
you sound so depressed, and I feel bad.
It's not that surprising because there's so much talent that left over the offseason, and especially the pass rushers. So Michael Bennett and Sheldon Richardson, between them, according to Pro Football Focus, had more than 100 pressures on the quarterback over the course of the season. So if you let 2 players who are that good walk without replacing them, then you're going to struggle placing pressure on the quarterback. I think they had high hopes for their 3rd-round draft pick, Rasheem Green, but he had a nice preseason, but he really didn't do anything on Sunday. So as long as you make sure Frank Clark doesn't wreck your offensive game plan, which he's not really a player who does that. Yeah, like you said, he's not a Khalil Mack or a Von Miller. He's a good player, but he's not a transcendent player like those guys. Then Trubisky is probably not going to be under pressure a lot of the time.
Yeah, it'll be with the pressure Trubisky will see will be more ghosts than moving around in the pocket when there's not even any actual pressure. So that's a fair assessment. it if you're I'm struggling to find proper phrasing for this. If you what are your expectations of Seattle's defense in this game? That's kind of leads into predictions, but that's a little separate. What are your expectations? Again, I just noted you sounded depressed, but I think you expect them to take advantage of Trubisky a little bit. Is what I'm guessing.
Yeah, so it's hard to know who the real Mitch Trubisky is. Is it the one we saw at the beginning of the Packers game or the rest of the game? And I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on whether they just ran out of plays that the Packers hadn't seen before, or if the play calling got conservative once they got out to a big lead, or whether that's the real Trubisky.
You know what it is, Ben, and it was me essentially taking the biggest L like publicly because I was one of the people that was like, oh, why are you guys all getting mad about preseason snaps? And I wrote like columns and analysis about all that stuff when there was that big little hubbub. I'm not sure if you were familiar with what happened, where they rested their starters against Kansas City. And I was like, it doesn't matter, they don't want the injuries, like they're gonna be fine. And then Nagy says that it was the preseason snaps that was the reason that they faltered in the second half. And if you think about it, it's because they faltered once they got off of their initial playbook script. So once they actually had to just call things on their own once they didn't have that. So I do think it was the fact that they ran out of play calls, and I do think it was partly the preseason snaps. And I feel stupid and. I haven't said it like on Twitter or any articles or anything, but anyone that's going to listen to this that disagreed with me is going to have the biggest, most sheepish smile just to rub it in.
That's interesting. Throughout a lot of the preseason, I was saying how it was really dumb that the Seahawks were playing their starters like in the third preseason game. So maybe I'm going to have to walk that one back a little bit.
Yeah, I think you're still right, but for defensive guys, I mean, that's fine. I think for Trubisky and the offense, they were learning a new offense. They probably actually still could have maybe used those 35 snaps to once they were. I know they're still vanilla, but they could have used those snaps to see what would have happened once they didn't have the script anymore. Because that's what the first half against the Packers was. They came out with a nice script that the Packers weren't ready for and kept them off balance. And then once Green Bay's defense and Mike Patton adjusted, Nagy and company didn't know how to respond. They didn't have anything on script to be able to combat that. I think Green Bay was mostly in a dime defense throughout the second half, and that wasn't something that the Bears have seen live reps of. So that's really concerning. Hopefully with an extra day going into this game against the Seahawks, they might be a little better. But I guess what I'm saying is I would feel a little good about Seattle's defense against Mr. Trubisky is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I would think they would do better than they did in Denver. Another one of the problems is it's so hard to play at altitude in Denver if you're not used to it. So if you're flying up from sea level and trying to compete for 60 minutes, then you just run out of air eventually. So that was probably part of the problem as well. So at least in Chicago, that won't be an issue.
Well, this is where I make a Windy City joke or something. But anyway, continue.
Yeah, but if they struggle again against the Bears, then that would be real cause for concern.
All right, Ben. Let's game predictions. How you see this playing out officially, and I'll share my thoughts as well.
So I think the Bears are favored by 3.5, and
mostly from home field advantage.
Yeah. So that says if the teams played on a neutral field, then the Bears might be very, very slight favorites, which I think is probably about right. I would feel differently if Doug Baldwin and KJ Wright were healthy, but they're not. So I think that's probably a fair spread. So that translates into something like 60 to 65% chance of winning for the Bears. And that seems reasonable. And if that happens and the Seahawks fall to 0-2, there's going to be a lot of panic, especially since the Broncos Bears was supposed to be the quote unquote easy part of the Seahawks schedule. And if they start 0-2 through that, then they're in a lot of trouble.
Give me Mitch Trubisky turnovers.
I'll say 1.
1, really? That was actually that would have been lower than I would have said, and I'd cover this team.
Yeah, the lack of pass rush, and if Trubisky just plays really conservatively and isn't under pressure much, then it's pretty easy to not turn the ball over in those circumstances. It's just a question of whether the Seahawks will be able to score and force the Bears into playing aggressively, and I'm kind of skeptical about that. What do you think?
I think more so that this game, and I think it'll be in Khalil Mack's hands. I think it's going to be very difficult. I know Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson isn't necessarily Aaron Rodgers in being able to drive a stake into Chicago's heart, but he's unless he goes like full God mode. I see the defense, the Bears defense, mostly taking care of this, and Trubisky not really having that much pressure. He might make a mistake or two just out of the Bears experimenting more and trying to challenge him more. I just see Mack and company really taking advantage of a poor offensive line. It'll still be close because the Bears offense won't muster up enough. I don't have like you discussing the defense and being a little depressed about like the kind of talent level they have. I'm that way with the Bears offense. I don't have much confidence in them, but I have confidence in that the defense is pretty great and can abuse an offense that can't really block. That makes sense.
Yep.
So I fully expect Mack to have. I mean, this is his Bears home debut. I fully expect them to have 2 or 3 sacks, probably a forced fumble or 2. I fully expect, there's also Akeem Hicks, Leonard Floyd. They have enough talent to be able to overcome that. And like we said at the start of the show, it's going to be a very ugly and trudging game. I'm already missing football since Sunday night, but I'm not going to be missing it come like 9:30 Central on Monday and be like, okay, just end this already. Just put me out of my misery.
Yeah, so Russell Wilson got sacked 6 times against the Broncos, so we'll see if Khalil Mack and the Bears can beat that.
Ben, I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you finding some time to talk with me, for both of us to, I guess, vent out our frustrations about our team's respective units. I really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was fun.
You can follow Ben on Twitter at Ben Baldwin, at BenBaldwin. He writes for The Athletic Seattle. Follow his work, does a lot of great stuff. Follow us on Twitter at WC Gridiron, and follow me on Twitter at Robert Zaglinski. Bears-Seahawks Monday Night Football in a few days. Maybe it isn't. Maybe it won't be as ugly as we think. Hopefully. Anyway, stay classy, everybody.